And she started talking to me. I was there, and at some point, I remember I said to her, "Do me a favor." And she goes, "What's that?" And I said, "Will you lock the door? Because at some point, I'm going to make a break for it." And she laughed like crazy. And I said, "I'm not joking. You better lock it." But I made it through the first night, and it was hard. It was so hard, Scott. And I kept coming back, and it was hard for the longest time. But finally, I broke through.
Welcome to Longevity Advantage. Our special guest today is Mike Drak. Mike is a retirement expert around everything associated not just with the money part, but he actually focuses mainly on the non-financial piece, which is, I think, the more important part that we all have a lot of questions about. So welcome, Mike. Welcome to the program. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
So Mike, you come from a corporate background, and I've kind of had corporate hats on and off, but I think you're one of those, sounds like based on your story, you were a lifer, which puts you in a unique group, but you're certainly not alone. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you came to get interested in retirement?
Well, graduating from high school, I remember employers would come on campus, and I went to two interviews, and I received two job offers right out of the gate. And you could do it back in those days. It was a lot easier then. And one of them was from a bank, and another was from IBM in their accounting department. I didn't know what to do, so I asked someone that I respected, and he said, "Well, it's always important to learn about money." So I said, "Okay, that makes sense." So I decided to take the banking job, and I ended up staying there for 36 years.
Time has a habit of marching on. Yeah, that's pretty
Does.
common with people. Yeah.
But it changed, and I spent most of my time in commercial banking. So I would deal with companies, small businesses owned by a family, and I had a lot of fun watching them, start up and grow over the years. And they almost became like family to me too, because you get close to them and you get to know everyone in the family, and you go to events with them. So I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot. But at some point, banking started to change a little bit. It got more stressful, and they were all talking, focus on product sales, and they started to forget about the customer, and that kind of threw me off. And at some point, I felt, maybe it's time to make a move and leave here. I didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go, but I said, no, I'm not having fun anymore. And while I was trying to figure things out, one day my boss invited me up to a meeting to talk about the profit plan in the conference room. And I walked in, I'll never forget, there was a lady sitting there, could have been my daughter, and they were going to package me off. Surprise. So I sat there, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. But secretly, I was so happy because I was going to leave anyways. And instead of just leaving everything behind, they gave me a severance check. So I was so excited about that. I remember when I got in the car, I phoned my wife on the way home, and I said, "Hey, we hit the lottery. This is wonderful." And everything was wonderful until the following Monday, when I'm sitting at home. My wife went to work. She was still working. And the phone didn't ring. I didn't get any emails. I was all by myself. My friends were still working, and I started to suffer from retirement shock, and I suffered from that for about a year until I figured things out. I had a hard time with it.
Yeah, as humans, we're all used to routines, right? Even if we don't like it, there's still
Yeah.
often value in just having the routine.
And you felt you felt needed, and you were involved with something, and you were working towards a common goal. And all my friends, the mistake I made was, I would say 98% of my friends were work friends, people I dealt with at work. And, it was like a tribe, like it was part of my family. And they kicked me out of the tribe. And I didn't know the effect that would have on me, but it was significant too. So I learned a lot of lessons over time. And, I felt like a crash test dummy for retirement. I kept knocking myself into all these walls and failing at different things and learning other things. And one day I decided, it would be smart to write a book about retirement to help others to go through this. I didn't want to waste all that time and all that stress trying to figure things out and adjust to it. And what I learned is it's so much more than just money. It's the non-financial aspects that you have to be concerned with and you have to figure out. So I remember I used to get up every morning at 4:30 and start writing on this book. I had so much passion for it. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't wait to start. And when you get up that early in the morning, Scott, before your first cup of coffee, your conscious mind doesn't, work. It's just like you're writing from your inner self,
Mm-hmm.
And it just comes out and flows. And I'll never forget when I sent the first draft of the book to my editor. She had it for about 2 weeks, and one day I get this call, and she was all excited on the phone. And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" And she goes, "Well, we got a major problem here." And I said, "Well, what is it?" And she goes, "Do you know what you wrote?" And I said, "Yeah, a retirement book." And she goes, "No, you wrote a book about not retiring." And when I heard that, I got scared because who's going to buy a book about not retiring? It didn't make any sense to me when I kind of realized what I had done. And then I thought, well, I remember seeing this episode on Seinfeld where Jerry and George go to NBC and they sell this show about nothing. And I said, well, if they could do that, well, I can sell a retirement book about not retiring. So I said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to order a bunch of books and I'm going to start doing seminars on it. And the first seminar I did, I'll never forget it. I was scared to go on the stage because I had visions they were going to boo and I had to sit down and whatnot. But after doing it, I found out that they loved to talk. And I figured out that most of the people in the room really didn't want to retire. They just needed help figuring out what they were going to do with the rest of their lives. And the book became a Canadian bestseller and it did quite well, just showing that so many people wanted to look at a different way of dealing with retirement. And it no longer meant, this traditional full stop, just stop whatever you're doing and take it easy and rest for the rest of your lives. It means so much more. And that's why it's important we come up with these new approaches and we educate people about the different non-financial aspects of retirement that are so important.
And it's if I look at the challenges most people face, right, it's the information around the non-financial piece. Everyone's trying to sell them a financial product
That's right.
to insure them or to fund them in whatever way. But those are relatively black and white things to figure out. The other is, I was saying before we got on, really from a pretty early age, what struck me was how many successful people struggled in retirement. And they struggled for all sorts of reasons. And it had nothing to do with money, obviously, because they had more money than they would ever spend. But that didn't translate to happiness and it didn't translate to health. And if you don't have those two things, money isn't much of a pillow to sleep on at night, is it?
That's so true. And more people need to be aware of that. Unfortunately, the financial services industry says the more money you have saved, the better your retirement will be. And it's not true. That's so false.
Right.
And there's so much more attached to it, but they're not talking about it because the focus is just on the actual money you manage to save. So, they're saying is if you have $1 million, you're going to have a good retirement. If you have 2, you're going to have a better retirement. But maybe you should save for 3 because you want to be careful and you don't want to run out of money in retirement, right? So the messaging is all wrong. It has to change.
Yeah, and it's hard when that messaging just keeps getting delivered, the same message over and over. Inevitably, gets harder to ignore, right? And you could use it as a smoking commercial or whatever commercial you couldn't imagine. But if you get exposed to it enough and it seems like that's the norm, right? Because you and I mean, we go out and we interview people, right? It's part of our work now, but most people don't really, they have a few data points and that's, they get affected by the media more than they do from their data points. And their data points are going to be essentially their peers who are generally all doing the same thing.
Right. And you know, you brought up a good point, because I always joke about we should put these warnings attached to these retirement commercials they show on TV, warning about the side effects from, you know, not planning out a retirement and being aware of what you're going to be facing and what you're going to go through, because no one talks about it. They show that picture of the people on the beach, right? Drinking a Corona maybe, and the sun's going down. Well, I don't know anyone that's going to spend 365 days of the year sitting on the beach drinking a beer. And if you're drinking a lot of beers, you're going to pay for it at some point too. Right. So yeah, the imaging it's just it's all fake, right? It's an illusion, and people have to be aware of all the things that are key for a good retirement. And health is such a big piece of that too.
Yeah, and so we can look at everything essentially with marketing attached to it. It means that there's money behind it for who is ever doing the marketing. That's right. So if we look at the things you're talking about, the things I talk about in longevity and sustained health, there's no money in it for anybody. That's except right. That there's wealth in it in terms of health, in terms of the true wealth is in it for the people who want to look for it. And so that's why it's so great to have you on to be able to talk about these things. There are surprisingly few people who have invested themselves in understanding it. There's, I would say, perhaps you run into this, I would say most people think they've done a good job until I start to ask them a few questions. And that's then right. They quickly get uncomfortable, right? And I don't mean to make them uncomfortable, but it just becomes apparent that our non-financial planning is so shallow in our thinking and so short-term, because that's generally how we've flown through life up to this point. And no one's really asked us, right? Because we're not asked about these things at work. We're not asked for them wherever we practice our faith. Family members aren't likely asking, and our parents at this point are probably gone.
That's right.
That's so right. It's not surprising that we have troubles. In your latest book, Retirement, Heaven or Hell, and I make sure I show that here. By the way, I love your writing style, and maybe it's your editors that I'm really complimenting. I'm not sure, but it's a really, really nice read. One of the things I always focus in on, I know you've got 9 different elements in here, and I want to just talk a little bit about this one here. You listed as number 8, attitude, and I kind of use that one as if you haven't got the right attitude, then nothing else is really going to fall in behind. I kind of put that one on the pointy end of clearing the way for other things to fall in. So talk to me when you say about retirement planning, or whether you're not retiring, or whatever that looks like, right? Tell me where attitude plays into it, because there's probably a number of dimensions to it.
Well, it's so important to enter retirement with a positive attitude. Because, you know, if you think retirement's going to be brutal, well, guess what? It will be. But if you enter it with a plan for what you want to do, and if you focus on the possibilities of retirement, because there's so many of those, it's amazing what some retirees are doing these days. And if you view retirement not as a finish line, but as a starting line to a new third stage of life, where you're going to do all these awesome things that you couldn't do when you were working full time, but now you have the freedom to pursue all these different things, and it's just a wonderful time. So yeah, it depends how you look at it, and that's, you know, we're creating awareness and we're educating people to say, hey, here's what you can do. Here's some of the different options you have available to you. What would you really love to do? What gets you excited? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What do you want to look forward to? And that's what we want to create, that kind of awareness and excitement. And plus the fact that, you know, it's known that positive people live longer than negative people. So why wouldn't you want to be positive?
The longer you live, the more of those people you have to hang out with, right?
That's true.
Yeah, you want to win the war of attrition.
That's right. You want to be the last person standing.
That'll make you the happiest person, right? That'll be your evidence. Yeah.
That's the payoff.
You also comment in your book about, which again I keyed in on, was ego. And here's two old white guys with gray hair talking. Okay, so this is the classic. You know, we're going to point our fingers at ourselves here for a minute. And I would say ego, particularly for men, but not exclusively, is a big barrier. And you talk about that. So tell me your version of it.
Well, when I was back in the corporate world, I felt like I was a gladiator, and they had us competing with each other to see who could, come up with the best sales results or whatnot. And the payoff was, recognition for success. Maybe they would give you some trinkets or a trophy at the end of the day. Maybe you would win a trip somewhere so you can hang around with all the other senior people in the bank and you could see how wonderful they are. And then you could say, hey, I got the better office, I got the trophy, I got a little bit more bonus money so I can buy some fancy suits so I can show that off too. And I tell you, it was so refreshing when that all changed, when I went into my third stage. And none of those things are important anymore. And what I like, instead of competing with people, I'm working with people where we work towards the same kind of goals. And then the ultimate goal for us is to help people. That's how I view it. And I'm sure you feel the same way too, but through the work you're doing. So it was so nice to get rid of that. And I don't think about those things anymore, which is kind of neat. And I don't get sucked into these commercials on TV that I got to drive this fancy car or I got to own this big house. Those aren't important to me anymore. What I want are experiences, great experiences, and do different things and meet different people. And those are the things important to me now. And my relationships with people are so important too. And the quality of work I do. And I love the work. And it's very satisfying. And when I can do work and I help someone and they say thank you, that's worth so much more to me than money. Really, the money's great, but really that's the reward for me. And so yeah, that change in mindset. But I had a problem because I was trained all my life to pursue money.
I can
And then all
imagine.
of a
Yeah.
sudden you're saying, okay, stop. It's hard, right? It's hard.
Yeah.
And then it took me a while to kind of transition into this non-money pursuit mode and say, let's pursue fun instead. Let's pursue helping people. Let's pursue writing a great book that I know will help a lot of people get through what I went through. And that's where I am right now. And I'm so much happier. I can't say enough about it.
As you're talking about it, I'm remembering my own experience with commercial bankers and and how much bigger that world is than just the going to the office.
Oh yeah.
Like how consuming it is that, and I know there are other jobs that would be consuming in other ways too. But when you talked about the social network and things that's all built around it, it gets really hard to know what's a work relationship and what's a friend relationship, which is good when you're working until you rip the work part away and suddenly there's no reason to have to have a conversation with that person anymore other than how's things going.
Yeah, it's true. And the funny thing is that I was pretty good at what I did. And I would win all these annual trips and they would fly me to these different places and they would have the executive of the bank there. But I didn't like going. I never enjoyed it because I didn't like hanging around them, right? They weren't my kind of people. They have different values than I did. To them, yeah, you wanted the big office, you wanted the big title, you wanted everyone to kind of, hope to be in your shoes, right? And they weren't important to me. They weren't my values. And that's why I always kind of struggled when I was in commercial banking too, because it was like I wasn't true to myself. I spoke like they did. I acted like they did, but that wasn't me. And now it's so refreshing now where I can be me. And it feels really good.
The time I've spent in the corporate world, and I have obviously got to know a lot of people as you would, um, and I at the age I'm at now, and I'm seeing those who are, we'll say in their 50s, who are still in that rat race, and they're entrapped at that point where they got too many years in to walk away.
That's right.
And it's too much like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute is what it feels like to consider doing anything else. So if we think about those people, whether you're in your 50s or 60s or wherever you're at, still in that space, for the ones who feel that they don't have a way out, right? What's your thoughts on that in terms of options for them? Do they have options, or do they need to kind of get to a certain age or certain point in their retirement freedom when they hit the magic number? What's your thoughts on those folks?
Well, you see, I went through what you just said, because at some point you're late in your career, and you're in a well-paying job that you can't duplicate anywhere else. And you have all this experience doing that particular job, and you're very good at it. And the worst thing, but when I reached a point where I didn't like doing it anymore, because it was starting to get to me and the stress was high. And I tell you what would happen to me. I read somewhere that, at lunchtime, you should take a break and get away from the office. And it said you should go for a walk. And I would go for a walk. And I would go to the grocery store and walk in there. And they had one of those blood pressure testing machines.
Yeah.
And I would sit down there and put my hand in and test it. And I'd be redlining. And I would do this like, a couple of times a week. But I didn't do anything about it because I was too busy at work. And the work had to be done. And it was slowly, really, it could have killed me, right?
Yeah.
And it was starting to build up until some point you say, the pain of staying is higher than the pain of leaving. And part of the problem too is you don't know where you're going to go. And you don't want to do a similar type job, but you don't know where your skills could be transferable. And you're caught in that money thing too, is I don't want to work for less.
Right. And you've been conditioned, you've been kind of grinding yourself down over time. And so the idea is I want to work as short as possible.
That's right.
Because your mindset says the less time I have to work, the more I have to put up with working. And I don't want to just walk into a different situation. So I think that's kind of where I was leading you with this, was this whole notion of retirement, kind of breaking that mold of 62 or 65 or Freedom 55. It was when I was younger.
Oh yeah, I
that was
remember that one.
The big sale is life after 65, right? In terms of this notion of, well, maybe I don't have to quit working if I might actually like something else more than what I'm doing, and I would be happy doing it. So if you find something that, say, that connects with purpose and has revenue stream attached to it, boy, you're golden, right?
Yeah, but you see, I had no idea about that.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. You're so trapped up in that space.
And I'm looking at my pension statements every day to say, okay, if I leave at 62, I get a reduced pension of X. But if I stay another year, I get Y.
Yeah.
And you don't know, the impact of that, like, quality of life, because I'm going to spend another year complaining, suffering from high blood pressure for a couple extra dollars. Like, at some point, where's the trade-off? And, thank God they packaged me off, because I would have probably stayed, right? Because it takes a lot of courage to leave.
Right.
And, so, that's why at the point where I said, I'm going to leave, well, of course I said, I'm going to leave in 2 years because I need to get prepared. That's how I do things. It's terrible. But it was the smartest thing that happened to me, but they did it for me. And then when I started thinking things through, I said, wow, what am I going to do with all this free time? And I need something meaningful to do. Because I just can't just sit around and watch TV or whatever.
And you can't, you can get up at 4 o'clock and start writing, but you can only do that so many hours a day, and your butt's going to get too sore.
Yeah. No, you put on a lot of weight. In my case, 53 pounds, because
Wow.
I'm a slow writer.
Yeah.
And the stress makes you.
So if I want to be a fast writer to keep lean. Is that how that works?
Okay.
There's a new tip. I got to get that one down.
But yeah, that was the trap I found, because it became all consuming. And it was just writing the book and doing this. And then they told me I had to create a website and social media, and I didn't know how to do any of those things. So I had a steep learning curve, and it ate up the clock a lot. I loved what I was doing, but it was hard. It was very frustrating at the beginning, and it cost me health wise for sure, for sure. And now I'm reached a point where I said, okay, I recognize that. I got to turn it around because I want to have 30 years of quality life ahead of me. And that's a big part of my focus now.
Yeah, and I think you really are kind of talking to the issue that I see with so many, and it doesn't matter. It could be your own business, whether you work for somebody else, big corporation or not. We all live inside of smaller spaces than we recognize, right? We think we're worldly because we get news coming in from around the world, but it's hard to imagine a different lifestyle in terms of what may fuel our income, what may fuel our energy, what
That's
may
right.
fuel our literally our food.
Yeah.
We all hear about these things, but it's really hard to imagine ourselves doing it, and that's that challenge, that fear, right? You talk a little bit about fear in your book. It's very real, and I think and it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes. The older I get, the easier it is. But because I can look at myself more honestly and say, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've been fearless about things. I'll try anything, and sometimes, rarely have a terrible failure, but worst case, between that and research, you've learned something, and eventually all these things start to roll in, and it's really hard to fail when you get such a wide experience. But you realize when you're inside that box, you kind of feel like, I don't know what else I don't know how many legs I have to stand on, right?
Well, you're trapped. You're trapped by fear.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because after leaving, I started to do these self-assessment tests. I did one for my health, and I said, oh no, I got a problem with that one. But then I did this one about, should I start my own business? And there were 20 questions. And I hit all 20 out of 20, which meant I should have never worked in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
But yet I made it work because I needed to, take care of my family, provide financial security, pay down the mortgage, and help with their education. So I needed to find ways of adapting to that environment and tolerating it for 36 years, believe it or not. And then I started thinking about things, and I said, yeah, it makes sense to me, because when I had a boss that gave me a lot of rope, a lot of autonomy, I excelled. But if I have someone micromanaging me, I'm terrible. I'm brutal. It's like a horse, and they're pulling on the reins really hard.
I could just about have a stopwatch from the time when that would happen until I was gone. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
It's just my first boss gave me tremendous rope, and it was one of the best jobs I ever had. And unfortunately, he set the bar so ridiculously high that for me was why would I put up with this other BS?
That's
And
right.
I know that this is what the work can be. Yeah. So and it's you go look back in your career, you've had obviously different bosses as you go through, and some were great and others not so much. You get a little bit more patient, I guess, but eventually you just get burned out and tired of it, I would imagine. I was in and out of corporate a couple of different times, and I was doing consulting work and different things.
Well, because you're fighting it all the time.
Yeah. When you're not cut out for it, and I didn't have the same. I was hoping to get a package and never got one.
I should have gave you some lessons.
I got looked over every time. It was like,
get over here.
But that's the way it goes. I'm sure it would have had other downsides, but I know the bank account would have liked it. So another place you talk about is tribe. And you talked about it with work in terms of the work people. So you left obviously that regular thing and had to start all over, I'm guessing, in terms of building new friendships. Is that right?
That's right. Because, like I said, essentially almost all my friends were work friends that, we developed relationships over 36 years, and they were still working. So I decided one day to join Toastmasters. because I needed to learn to do public speaking. And to be honest, I think I talk about it in the book. I was petrified in getting in front of people and speaking about anything. I turned down jobs because I couldn't do it.
Really?
And it was so uncomfortable for me. But I said, I gotta go to Toastmasters and learn how to public speak, because this is how I'm gonna be going out and talking to seminars about the book and things like that. So the first time, Thursday night, I went to the meeting, sat in the parking lot and bailed. The following Thursday, I did the same thing and bailed. And so the third Thursday, I said, I gotta go in, or I'm never gonna get this done.
Yeah.
I was really scared. And I remember walking in, and a lady walked up to me, and I think they were looking for newbies because they know we're scared. And so they try to talk us
They're the
down.
ones that have the.
Oh yeah, that blank look. Your face is red and you're hyperventilating.
Arms are sweaty. No, can't shake it.
It's terrible. And she started talking to me. I was there, and at some point, I remember I said to her, "Do me a favor." And she goes, "What's that?" I said, "Will you lock the door? Because at some point, I'm going to make a break for it." And she laughed like crazy. And I said, "I'm not joking. You better lock it." But I made it through the first night, and it was hard. It was so hard, Scott. And I kept coming back, and it was hard for the longest time. But finally, I broke through. And I was the happiest guy in the world, because that was one of my biggest fears. And I conquered it through the help of that tribe. And so they were so dear to me, and they were so nice, and they helped me so much. And I accomplished this huge goal, this thing that was holding me back for so many years. And then I joined other tribes. So I joined a bike tribe, and we would, before the pandemic, we would go out and ride for a couple hours on a Sunday. And then at some point we would stop for coffee and just sit there and talk about life and what various people are doing. And that was a lot of fun. And then I got into this swimming tribe, and they're kind of more hardcore, but still a lot of fun. And I started swimming late in life. I struggled with it, and they wouldn't let me quit, and they kept encouraging me. And and they're just wonderful people, and they're quality people. And I value our relationships so much, and I look forward to getting together with them on a regular basis. So like 3 tribes, and it's a lot of fun.
So you mentioned swimming, biking, and I'm trying to think what's the sport that goes with those two.
Oh, that running.
So you have, I would say, not alluded to, you have declared that you plan to do an Ironman. Tell us about that.
Well, it's George's fault at the swim club. His wife got me in trouble too. She swims there as well, and I swim in her lane. On her 80th birthday, she celebrated by swimming 2,000 meters nonstop, and I was struggling to keep up behind her.
Sorry, which birthday?
Her 80th.
80. That's 80. What I thought I heard.
Yeah, 80. Yeah. 80. And it drove me crazy, because I was really hurting. I couldn't complain to her because she's almost 20 years older than I am, right? And I looked at her and I said, I want to be like you when I turn 80. Yeah. And then I started talking to her husband, and that crazy guy's doing an Ironman when he turns 80 in Cozumel. And, he was telling me stories about it and how he worked towards it and the training and whatnot. And he kind of goaded me into, deciding, well, if George can do it at 80, I can give it a shot too. And I need to get back in shape anyways. And that's a great way to do it, through the training. And there's a support group too of people training for these events. So I said, you know what, George, I'll give it a shot. So I'm going to do an Ironman. But I got to lose 53 pounds first.
Well, you do the work, and you follow the diet, the weight will take care of itself. I tell people all the time, if weight loss is your goal, you got the wrong goal, right?
That's right.
The weight will take care of itself, but you don't, it's, the Ironman training is a world unto itself. And I talk everybody out of doing it. And if you can't talk, convince me, then you don't have anywhere near what it's going to take.
Yeah.
But so I'm not successful in talking everyone out of it. But it's always that I remind them that it truly is an investment, but it's a lifetime investment that will
That's right.
last for years, because it doesn't happen with everybody, but it's such a commitment that it truly changes people. And they
For sure, it will change your lifestyle, and I'm already thinking about post Ironman. So I'll have Ironman fitness, and then I'll just pull it back to like half Ironman fitness, maintain that, and maybe do one race a year after that, just to maintain my fitness. And so yeah, it's a very important goal to me. But it's fun too, hanging around with these crazy people. But what they showed me, these crazy people, I call them retirement rebels, is that all the stuff they talk about aging and how old are you and you're supposed to act this way, it's not true at all. You should see these people at 80 years old, what they're doing. They could outrun people 40 years old, right? These 80-year-olds act like they're 40. And I know 40-year-olds that act like they're 80. And that's getting back to what you said about attitude. So it's, it really opened my eyes. And it's not just there. You go to the gym and you see what people are doing. You go back to school and you see these people coming and taking these courses or trying to get their degrees because they never finished them when they were, working full time. And it's just amazing. I look at it and I go, wow, it's really special. But no one talks about it. And that's what we're trying to open people's eyes to say, hey, look what's possible if you want to put the work in, right?
Yeah, that was that's when I got interested in Ironman triathlon, was in my 40s, and it was sitting watching the older athletes doing it, and I had the exact same response and said, if they can do it, what excuse do I have?
Okay, so here's my question for you, Scott. Do you cry when you watch the age groupers cross the line? I get a tear. I always get a tear. I get a tear just thinking about it, because it's have their stories, right?
It's yeah, and that's, I mean, Ironman does a great job at really researching, and there are so many stories. So without going too much into it, but what I tell people is, so if you sit there and, which I've done, just watch the athletes. There's 2,000 or more will do an Ironman on any given day, and you realize there's 2,000 different ways of doing it.
That's right.
There's no right way, but there's a lot of ways that you can be successful if you do the work. And you pace yourself. And the nice thing, which again, many things I learned about Ironman, was it was like compressing retirement years, if you will, all into one day. And you realize, because it requires a lot of planning, so that will play in your favor because you're a planner. So it teaches you about the value for planning, because you ask not just for what you need to do, but for what might happen. And you can't plan for every eventuality, but what you realize out on the course, and you will get there, is partway through the run, you're just like, you're like, you've lost cognitive ability at that point. That's, again, of things that are hard to imagine. It can happen even from hyponatremia, just from, if you don't manage your sodium levels. Like literally, I had to walk my son in from a half marathon in Ottawa a couple of years ago. He sweat so much and he wasn't taking electrolytes.
Yeah.
And he literally was drunk on his feet, but just the fatigue. But
you're right on the edge. You're right on the edge near the end.
And that's kind of what can happen in life when something throws a curve at you, and the less prepared you are for it, the harder it's going to be to deal with it and to recover from it. So take me to the piece where you do, I think, some real magic work when you're not writing, is with people in terms of the design piece. Take me through kind of that design experience around the kind of questions that we should be asking ourselves around designing our, and I always feel bad calling it retirement, because I think, like you, I don't think of this black and white. I don't really have any retirement plan other than, I probably will work a few less hours a week, probably each year, kind of cut back a little bit and have a little bit more freedom. But I love what I do, so there's no goal of turning it off. But in any event, how do you work on a design with somebody to get them started on it?
Okay, so the reason I wrote the 2 books is because I wanted they're do-it-yourself books, really. So they're people that you want some guidance, they want to learn about, you know, the approach I recommend towards retirement. You read the books and then you start, you know, putting the pieces in place. But what I've gone a step further. My wife's an investment advisor with one of the large banks in Toronto, and I I consult for her clients. Let's call it consult. And what I do is I get them to read the 2 books, and then, you know, we sit down and we say, okay, let's start designing your own unique retirement lifestyle. So let's start thinking about what that retirement is going to look like for you, what will make you happy, what interests do you have. Maybe you want to travel once a year. Maybe you understand the importance of maintaining your health, so you're going to join a gym. Maybe you're going to get a personal trainer and all these other things. And we put all these things in place, and we actually, you know, break it down to what does a perfect retirement day look like for you? What is a week? What is a month? What is a year? And then we actually cost that lifestyle out down to the dollar, right? And so we might come up with a number, say it's 60,000 after tax. So we know the number. We know exactly what that number is. And we know that number will give you a great lifestyle, the one that you really want, because we figured all that out. Then we go to my wife, who has to do the hard work, and we say, here, we need 60,000 after tax. Do we have it from our retirement assets? And she'll crunch the numbers, and hopefully she comes back and says, yeah, you have a surplus. You can retire today. And you should see the people light up when they hear that, because really they have no idea, because they don't know how much the retirement's going to cost them. And they have no idea what they're going to do in retirement. So how could you ever, you know, match the two? But we do. And, you know, it's so clear and direct. And, you know, sometimes, you know, there's a shortfall. So maybe they need another 10,000 after tax. And we say, okay, you know, that's our reality. So let's look, can we cut back some expenses? Maybe some aren't as important as others. Or can we find a way of generating some additional income through maybe part-time work to bring that in to cover up the shortfall? And that's what people get excited about, because they're saying, okay, I can toy with this thing. I can tweak it and make it work for me. And it just takes the guesswork out of retirement planning. You actually know what that money is for that you've been saving for all these years, and you know how you're going to deploy it to cover your retirement lifestyle. And when it matches, when things are in balance, well, life is pretty good. And then you can go out and start doing all these things that you really want to do. And you don't waste any time figuring things out after you retire. And you avoid retirement shock, because you're retiring to something that you've already determined, and you've written out, and you have that plan. And yeah, it changes everything. It just makes so much more common sense. But unfortunately, financial services industry is not there yet. Some people are starting to catch on. They're looking at what my wife and I are doing, and they're starting to copy it, which makes a lot of sense, because that's what people need. They need that guidance, and they need it 3 to 5 years before they retire.
Right. So you're right on. I think a really important part of where I try to come in at people around longevity and generating or extending health span is it isn't about luck, right?
Yep.
You can look at money and have a sense of it should be less about luck, certainly than health, but so much of it is a result of the planning and execution.
That's right.
Executing against a plan, you're guaranteed to have a much better outcome than you would have had you just guessed.
That's right.
And the difference is you got a plan to guide you along the way to know if you're going on or off track. So you talk about whether you want to do an Ironman in Cozumel, whether you want to travel to travel the world on your first year when you stop work, for example, right? You want that in there to know what that's going to look like, and not be kind of and not spend years wondering, well, I don't know if I'm going to have enough or not, right? You can spend years, well, I have seen in certainly the older generation who are really raised on the mindset of saving, save, 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 and they've been excellent savers. But I would look at it for retirement. So one of the elements I look at with people around non-financial retirement is how are you going to invest in making your home sustainable?
No, that's so important.
Right. So you want to age in place or stay in your home, but you don't make investments to make that a reality. You wait until if you're going to need it. Well, by the time you need it, it's like you say, it's too late.
Or you wait till someone falls and it's too late and they broke a
Right.
hip or whatever.
Right. So you need it at least 5 years ahead of, you need to have the plan in place 5 years before you need it. And then because 5 years goes by really quick.
Oh yeah, in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, it really is. It's the planning that gives you the freedom. People have this opposite notion. I talk about, I do consulting on operational discipline. It's the same thing. Discipline sounds like, we're getting the old leather belt out. No, it's actually, that's what gives you the freedom to operate because you know where the boundaries are and you do whatever you want to do in today, that if it's anywhere inside this box that you've designed to know that it fits, have at it, right?
Yeah. So, what you're saying is basically, having awareness of what's important and executing and doing the right things to make sure you get the outcome that you want. And, health, like we talk about health, so you got $10 million. So what? If you're not healthy to spend it doing the things that you love to do, it isn't worth a lot of money. And then I get worried about the people that are so used to savings and saving and saving. And then it's time to spend it and they're too cheap because they're scared to spend any of the money we have. So they have all this money and they finally wake up when they're maybe in their 70s and say, okay, I can spend it now. I'm comfortable now. And they're not healthy enough to do it, to do the things that what they would love to do, like travel or things. And it's such a sad thing. But getting back to my wife, we're thinking about this all the time. How can we help retirees, come up and have this great lifestyle? So we're making like a list of people that do renovations that can do these things to a house and make it age friendly. And we're taking the guesswork out of it and say, well, don't worry about it. We have some names of trusted people that do good work. And we're making it easier for people and say, here's the name, just give them a call and have it done. Because people, they hesitate and they drag their feet and procrastinate because, they just, whatever.
Yeah. So one last item I want to kind of end with was, again, in your book, you talk about purpose. And I think that's I'll kind of come back to that. It is, for many people, very elusive. Right, they're waiting for it to fall from the sky.
Good luck with that.
Right, they're not sure where it's going to come from or how to pursue it. You have some thoughts on that? Why don't you kind of? Most of us are looking for either some purpose or to refine our purpose, or really maybe be able to articulate it some way.
Well, it's so important to have a good reason to get out of bed in the morning, especially in retirement. Prior to retirement, you had great purpose because you had to work, you had to make money, you had to pay down the mortgage, you had to take care of the kids. And things change though when you retire because the kids, they're gone and you're by yourself at home, the mortgage is maybe gone. So why are you going to work? Or at that point, you're not working, but you have to replace it with something that's important to you, that gives you those same feelings that your work did, a sense of satisfaction, achievement, of accomplishment, meaningful, fulfilling things. And, it could be even more than one purpose, right? You have multiple purposes, but you need that in your life because that's what, living is all about. And I agree with you. Throw that word retirement away. We're talking about life and living, right, and feeling good about yourself. And you want to be relevant and you want to say, hey, I'm not retired. I'm running a small little business and I'm having a great time because I'm helping a lot of people. And it's great. And it makes me feel like $1 million. That's what you want. And everyone needs that. But you see, I shouldn't say everyone needs it, because there's the comfort oriented retirees that don't. They looked at retirement as a finish line. That was their ultimate goal. They just want to take it easy and rest, and they're comfortable with that. Maybe just hang around with their family, stay within their comfort zone, and not do anything. And that's okay if that makes you feel good, if that works for you. But it doesn't work for people like me, and I know for sure, Scott, it doesn't work for you. We need more, right? And until we find that more, that purpose, we're going to struggle, and we're going to be frustrated, and we're not going to be happy. And that's what happened to me until I figured things out. And then all of a sudden I got more purpose than I can handle right now. But it's good. And it makes me happy, and it keeps me young, and keeps me positive. Right?
It's a huge motivator for all sorts of things, right? It's a reason now to get up in the morning. It's a reason to want to be healthy. It's a reason to want to engage with people.
That's right.
And people naturally want to be around you more.
Well, because you're happy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're positive.
Yeah, it just all, yeah. So, and recognizing it's not easy for everybody, but I would say my thought is just keep trying a bunch of different stuff, like commit to every week or something, do something like getting a Toastmasters, or doesn't have to be that, but the whole idea is just keep trying and experimenting, because worst that happens, you didn't like it and you learned something.
But if you fail, who cares?
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world anymore. It's not like you have some boss looking at you and say, hey, you're not that good. Who cares?
That's right. You get to walk, you just get up and walk out now.
Yeah, I quit.
Yeah.
I'll go try something else. Why not, right?
I'm going to lunch. Have a nice life.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, in order to save time, try to work on this before you actually retire.
Right.
So you have something that you're excited about and you can't wait to start. And then spend that time. Maybe you have to go take some courses or learn some new things. Do that before you actually leave, so you can hit the ground running and start doing this stuff. And it's so much fun.
And plan to continue to learn, right? I teach people of all ages, and you talked about having to get up the learning curve once you did your pivot, and I'm sure you enjoyed it, the learning aspect again, right?
I didn't like it. I hate computers.
Well, apart from the computer part, but you get to stimulate a different part of your mind, and
well, you
now
need
kind
that.
of get you thinking about some things differently than you did before. So,
but it comes down to this, Scott. It's use it or lose it.
Yep.
Your mind, your muscles, it's the same thing. And that's why I sometimes think about it. It's sad, because it's almost like when we retire to nothing, we lose the edge we had. So we were firing on all cylinders. We were, doing great. We were sharp. And then we're trying to dumb it down in retirement by sitting there watching TV, not taking any risks, not learning anything new. And that happens, right? And then all of a sudden you're almost like zombie, like it's the saddest thing.
Anything that's moved slow just kind of creeps up on you, is whether it's weight, whether it's just activity, socializing. The things that are slow creepers are the hardest ones to detect.
And they compound over time.
Yeah.
And I tell you, when you do wake up, and you will, and you go, what happened? And try to reverse that, it's so hard. So you never want to get there. And that's again why we're creating awareness, to say, don't let this happen to you. There's a better way, but you just have to find out the correct way for you. And there's so many possibilities. And that's why it takes some time, right?
Yeah. So, and that's what I think about, it's so good about your books, is it's essentially a do-it-yourselfer. Here's the toolbox, go build what you want.
Exactly.
Right. But you got the tools to do it now. So that's, and there are so few people like you out there, Mike. And I know in the financial world, I struggle with many of them around. They just, it's not a piece. If they don't have a product to sell, then they really don't have time for you. And it's such an important piece of adding value to people's lives, really at any point in life, but particularly when you start to think about what's that third phase of your life going to look like, because we're all going to do it different. Right. That's the beauty of it. Right. And the more options you have, the earlier you start, the more options you have, and the better outcomes you're going to have. So. Good. Well, thank you very much, Mike. This has just been a wonderful conversation. It's a topic I have a tremendous amount of passion for. And I know everybody kind of thinks about it, but they have a hard time knowing where to go to get advice. They tend to rely on other people who know as little as they do. So this is a good opportunity for them to get to hear someone who's an expert talk about it and can only learn. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you being with us, sharing some of your ideas. And I know there's a bunch more in both your books up there. So I'll put the books titles in, and I can put contact for you in the notes down below too, if they want to reach out.
Go ahead. And there's one last thing. It's just I'm going to be working with boomingencore.com. It's a lifestyle website, and that's where we're going to post a lot of our content, and there's going to be a lot of interesting information there. So
great.
You know, I'm excited about it. Yeah, the sky's the limit right now. We're just kind of opening up, and we're going to try to change the financial services approach, which isn't going to be easy, but we're not going to give up because we're boomers and we can do anything.
Yeah, this isn't the first time kicking this can, is it?
That's right. We're going to give it to them, but good. But no, it was such a pleasure talking to you, Scott. You know, we're on the same page with respect to this, and I love the work you do on longevity. It's so important, and it teaches me a lot, and I'm incorporating it in my own lifestyle. So thank you for that.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm here to help you.
I know. I'll keep sending emails.
Or make you feel guilty about it if you sit down too long writing.
I need that too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Have a great day. Appreciate it.
You too, Scott. Take care.